Are we a pair? Me here at last on the ground, you midair. Sending the clouds. Isn't it bliss? Don't you approve? One who keeps tearing around, one who can't move. Where are the clouds? Send in the clouds. Just when I'd stopped opening doors, finally knowing the one that I wanted was yours, making my entrance again with my usual flair, sure of my lines. No one don't you love I thought that you'd want what I want. Sorry, my dear. But where are the clouds? Quick, send in the clouds. Don't bother.
Desiree, I should never have come. I'm sorry. To flirt with rescue when one has no intention of being saved. Please try to forgive me.
Isn't it rich? Isn't it queer? Losing my time in this late in time. But where are the clouds? There ought to be clouds. Where? Maybe next year.
I understand that it was a very close call between calling that song Send in the Clowns and Send in the Fools. Sondheim was very exercised about it. But now actually any other title, any other words would be completely unthinkable. It's a wonderful song. And it's about a mistimed life. It's full of regret. Regret for what might have been. Part of that regret we may be feeling and experiencing a year down the line. Regret for things that have been missed. People who we miss. and who we weren't able to say goodbye to properly. We've all had brushes with mortality. It has just been preposterously weird. We had a deanery chapter meeting today with Bishop Clive, and he asked all of us to come up with 2 or 3 words to describe our feelings throughout the pandemic. And I think only 2 people were able to find in their 3 words one positive one. No one has enjoyed this. It has been antithetical to so many things we want and expect in our lives. Let me take you back a year to a newspaper headline from the 23rd of March 2020. Because the Daily Telegraph suggested to us that the return to normal life may be as much as 6 months away. If only they knew. If only we'd known. And maybe in our heads we put our plans, our dreams on hold. And maybe we said, maybe next year. Maybe. Maybe is not a word we like. We tend to like certainty. And if there's one thing that the last year has not been, it has not been certain. We've waited for daily briefings, statistics we never knew mattered. And all the time, in the back of our minds, we've been asking, where is the God I worship in all of this? And maybe that's a question you might want to ask tonight. We hear that vaccinations are rolling out at an incredible speed, over 800,000 yesterday. We're also told that the European mainland is struggling, and they could well have a 3rd wave. And that if there's going to be a 3rd wave in Europe, there's going to be a 3rd wave in this country as well. Mm-hmm. So that return to normal life, 6 months, we might smile now, but at the time it sounded like an awful lot. A lot of time to put everything on hold and to say, maybe next year. But of course, the terrible truth of it is that for some people, there wasn't going to be a next year. For 130,000 people, there wasn't going to be a next year. And all those people we've lost in what we might consider to be the normal course of events. Some of them very well known to us. Tomorrow, it's John Bolas's funeral. And John, to those of us at Holy Trinity, was very much part of the furniture. And he's just another example of the treasures that are slipping through our fingers, and for whom the words maybe next year are not applicable.
Hello. Not so bad, Joe, thank you.
And so,
all right, not so bad.
Here are some questions for us to ponder. What are today's headlines saying? How has my view of the world changed in a year? How has my view of the life I live and its meaning changed in the last year? How has my view of myself changed? How has my view of God changed? Does my life, like the song, feel misplaced, mistimed, maybe even on hold? Is it true that life is what happens while you're making other plans? We've been doing this for a year now. That feels like a very long time. I suppose the older you get, the smaller proportion of your life a year is. But I do sense that we have lost something, as well as perhaps gaining some other things. And today's a day to lament the things we've lost. It's to weep, to wail, and to look to the cross, perhaps, where Jesus himself in agony lamented using the Psalms, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it's all right to lament. Old Testament's full of it. People bewailing their relationship with God and the turn of events and the tide of history. And forces outside ourselves can either promote our dreams or can shatter them. And our view of the world changes. And our view of life changes. And of ourselves. And of God. Next week is Holy Week, when we recall and enter into the mystery of the events of our salvation. And I would suggest that this will be a Holy Week like no other. There will still be restrictions in place, but there will be worship. And that really is my input for the night, because I know how this has affected me. I'm surprised how deeply it has affected me. And it may well be that it has affected you in different ways. And that is entirely right and proper. So those key 5 questions about how our views have changed in the time since the beginning of the first lockdown on the 23rd of March, 2020. Who would like to start us off?
It's made me realise how fragile life is.
Very fragile.
How do you feel about that?
Me?
Yeah.
Anxious. Pleased every day that everything's all right. I think everybody knows what happened to John. And it still leaves me very fragile, because I don't know, and we don't know, how much damage has been done. Gradually, bit by bit, he's having tests, and the last one he'll have will be the MRI, which will be coming in the next few weeks, to see what sort of damage, lasting damage, there's been. So it's been sort of every day worrying about, well, not worrying, but concerned about what the future holds.
I wonder if I wondered actually if you were going to say something like, we've had to learn to live in the moment.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
very much so.
and that, I think that can be construed as a good thing, because if we live more, you know, we waste so much time living in the past and living in the future instead of living for the right now.
Mm.
And it's a besetting sin of mine, and not to appreciate what there is here and now. I think that goes alongside the fragility and the anxiety. Anxiety was one of my 3 words for the bishop. I'm not telling you what the other 2 were.
I've been suffering really bad from anxiety for the past few months. So I haven't been to church rather. So I was really bad at that. Yeah.
You wouldn't have got in, mate, because we haven't been meeting.
Well, see, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
I've been really bad about, yeah. Partly because of the motorcycle accident, but partly because of what's going on with last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody suffers from panic attacks or anxiety attacks, but I wouldn't wish them on anybody.
It is.
But I can imagine the amount of people that are suffering from it now. It's yeah.
That you're quite right, Lee. The increase in the situation with regard to mental health generally, which was already becoming much more of a public issue than maybe it had been. I think it's just shot through the roof now.
Yeah.
Because of precisely the situations that Verity has described, and for some of us, our own natural tendencies to have mental health issues as well. And that's something that it just reveals and makes us perhaps more vulnerable than we would like other people to know about.
Well, it does. I mean, it's for example, the people in hospital, and that anxiety must be really bad because they're shut off from their family and friends.
Very much so.
That's just, it's what you need when you're anxious.
I think that a lot of our building faith meetings have, the whole point is the word faith, and I think I've had a scripture that's been. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
It's all right. I get terribly confused with the mute and the unmute button. I think it ought to be much clearer on the screen. Anyway, I've had a scripture that's been with me for the whole week, and I do believe it's encouraging to us all, because everybody who has spoken tonight speaks of real problems. And when I was reading through my Bible, the whole thing, maybe a few years ago now, I used to underline 1 or 2 things that I thought would be really helpful to me. And never more appropriate than at the moment, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And I think if we've got the faith for that, if we can learn to have the faith for it. I think it will be helpful. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And I do hope that that would serve to encourage us tonight.
I think that's quite brilliant. And I think I would want to extend that and say, how do we actually do that? I mean, we talk about the processes of growing in faith, building faith. In the end, we're talking about coming to Jesus. Come to me, all you who labor and are overburdened, and I will give you rest. And part of the kind of challenge for us in the crazy times, and for many of us busy times as well, is how do we shape our lives so that they reflect the image of Jesus in us, instead of just being pulled this way and that by the world we live in? What is it about Jesus that enables us to find in him the source of grace and strength and all the things that we crave? You know, the scripture is phenomenally powerful, but it's also phenomenally challenging. And I'm left with the question, well, how do I do that? I'm currently writing an address for a group of clergy who've asked me to speak to them at the end of this week about mission in a time of pandemic. And I'm beginning to think I've run out of clues. I have a horrible feeling they're all going to be much better at it than me, because that's where I kind of, I sort of get washed up on this particular shore. Yes, Jesus, I want to be close to you. Yes, Jesus, I believe you are the way, the truth, and the life. Yes, Jesus, I believe that you are the source of strength and comfort. Could I have some, please? There's a wonderful cartoon that did the rounds last year. It was a cartoon of the empty tomb. And it said, "Dear Jesus, if you aren't using that, can I borrow it for a few days?" Because, you know, the level of tiredness is just so profound. And there is something here, I think, about healing. And healing takes many forms, as we've discussed in previous sessions. Something about letting go. And that's really hard when you're so invested in things. I mean, the anxiety that Verity described, you can't let go of that, can you? Can you? I don't know. Some people could, or some people could cope with it maybe in a way that enabled them to kind of get on with the rest of their lives. But this is really, really deep and damaging stuff. And I want to be consoled by Jesus. And I see him carrying his cross towards Calvary and inviting me to join him. And that's terribly scary. He who loves his life will lose it. He who gives his life for my sake will find it. And all that kind of life and death stuff comes front and center for us.
Well, you've been through the COVID experience.
Not as bad as some.
No, but it's a frightening experience when you don't know. Well, you've never been there before and nobody else has ever been there before.
No, that's true.
And that's part of the scary part of it.
And I am led to suspect that it has left its mark.
I'm sure it has.
You know, I was saying to Fiona earlier, my breathing has never been the same.
Yeah. No.
And I know I'm not the only person on this meeting who's still suffering from the effects.
Yeah.
And so it's changed us. It's changed us.
I think for me, my view of God hasn't changed. The journey I've been on, both personal and at work, it's reinforced what I thought of God, because it's made me realise that the only person I can depend on is God. When COVID first hit Waterside and we were calling ambulances and they'd turn up at the door and then they'd turn around and drive off, and people in there had no treatment, and we had to sit by their beds and hold their hands while they died.
Yeah.
The only person that was there was God in that room. There was nobody else. We did a service today at Waterside and we lit all the candles for all the people we'd lost. And the people who had capacity understood what we were doing, and they said, "Is that how many people have died here?" And we said, "Yeah." And a couple of them then said, "Well, aren't we blessed and aren't we lucky?" My gosh, you know, we are. And I mean, for me, I held on to Deuteronomy. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. You know, because I was afraid. I was petrified.
Yeah.
After I'd had it to go back in there, and we still have cases now.
Yeah.
But, you know, all of us, every single one of us at Waterside, when we've come to the end of our rope, that's when God stepped in. When we've all cried together and thought we can't do this any longer, we're still doing it. And it's in God's strength. It's not in our strength, because it's been a hell of a year. A hell of a year for Waterside, you know, and they've been my family more than my own family have, because I've been too frightened to go to my own family.
Mm.
So, you know, it's taught me to depend on God. It's taught me that no matter what, God is there. And he'll get me through, and he has. So it hasn't changed it, it's reinforced it.
What if he hadn't done?
But he did, Father. You know, when I went into hospital, when the ambulance came for me, do you know the only thing I took with me in hospital? I didn't even take a pair of knickers. I took my Bible. And you know, at times I couldn't read it because I was too ill, but I could hold it. And that Bible on that table then brought those nurses into that room in full PPE. Oh, there was the conversation.
Sure. But let me return to my previous question, because the evidence of 130,000 people dying indicates that you got away with it.
I did, but you know what? I know that if I hadn't, yes, I never want to lose my family. I love my children. I love my family. But I know where I'm going.
That's very true. And that in itself is a very revealing comment, because we end up seeing everything, if we're not careful, seeing everything in terms of the earthly life we know and that which we enjoy, and all the precious things for us, our families, our friends, the things, the relationships, the events, the things we do that matter to us. We spend lots of time thinking about that, and I suspect very little time about what might lie beyond that. And this idea that we have a future hope which can also be a present hope. I don't deny that, but there is always the future looking forward and beyond, which the cross speaks to in a particularly powerful way. And all the events of next week, from the entry into Jerusalem to the Last Supper and the washing of the feet, all actions that are invested with profound importance because of what is about to happen to Jesus. And Jesus is going to be executed. And Jesus is going through the action of the Spirit and the power of the Father to confound everything we know about our earthly existence. And it just puts this enormous question mark against all those things that we have viewed with certainty. And this year's done that for me as well. But, you know, a number of people rather smilingly said, well, I'm not giving up anything for Lent because I've had a Lent for the last year. Not strictly accurate, but one understands where they're coming from. And in fact, what this year could have done for us is redirect our focus in an entirely healthy way. Because we have had experiences which have challenged us, it's made us look again at the reality of the hope that we hold on to. It's not just a kind of abstract thing. Oh, yes, of course we talk about it because it's in the creed. It's something that we we are able to recognize and hold on to even more. And the hope becomes more important to us because we're not finding it anywhere else. And I mean, when I ask whether our views of things have changed, I'm looking at this. I'm trying to look at this as something phenomenally positive, because it may lead us to live our lives as we know we should.
I think the fact that we've all had more time on our hands has been tremendously important.
Sorry, Jude, your sound is cutting off. I think I heard you say that the fact that we've had more time on our hands has been important. Is that what you were saying?
Yes. It's certainly made me realise that in the past I've wasted an awful lot of time. I've filled it with things that are unimportant.
You're saying that in the past you've wasted a lot of time. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. I can just about hear you, and I can translate it into a. Oh, all right.
And I think it would be nice to think people would live simpler lives without the need for such a lot of material things.
It would be nice to think that people would live simpler lives without the need for material things. Is that a rough translation of what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, it was fine. Excellent. Oh dear. Always helps to have a good fast, doesn't it? That's marvelous. Excellent. Yeah, that's the kind of view of life that might well change. People finding out what's really important. Yeah. Who knows?
I wonder
it's helped us find out more about ourselves and the strength that we have inside that's enabled us to get to today, year on, against all the odds, really, with what's gone on during the year. And you find that you're stronger than you ever thought you would or could be.
Yeah.
And that's got to be a lot to do with our faith in God, hasn't it? He is there with us, helping us along, even if we think we just we haven't had a really good week or a good day. But imagine what it'd be like without him.
Well, unthinkable is probably, well, it would be my answer. If you think it's been a rough year, then imagine what that would have been like without God.
Yeah.
And that's on a whole number of levels. Yeah.
If I might come in very briefly, and apologies for having to leave you, but I had an urgent telephone call to take. I'd sum it all up as wake up time. The Old Testament prophets, in a very positive way by and large, try to encourage people to turn to God. In our own day and age, we think, well, what's happened to quite a large extent is the product of nature plus humankind's inability to take responsibility in a way that would have minimized all the dangers of this last 12 months. So it really is a call to think again about why you're here, and of course, all those questions are on that page are so apposite, and of course, it's not about just our world; it's the whole world that's changed, and I'm certain other people are coming to terms with the fact that their lives have changed permanently. But the question then is, well, where's God in it? Well, my response to that would be, well, he's certainly in it, up to his neck, working with us and trying to encourage us to turn to him. End of sermon.
Reminded me of the story of the two prisoners in the concentration camp who were witnessing the punishment of a third prisoner who was being basically tied, well, effectively crucified. And one turned to the other and said, "So where is your God now? In the middle of this utter horror, where is God now?" And he turned and he looked at the man who was being crucified and he said, "He's there. He's there." And that's so, I mean, Good Friday is just the most intense experience possible if we enter into it, because I don't think anyone can ever come to terms with the idea of a crucified God. A God who goes to the cross and is submitted to earthly death. And it's resonated through the centuries as the most seismic thing that's ever happened to anyone, anywhere. Whether you believe in it or not, it has still had the most massive impact on history, on culture, on tradition, and most obviously in the church. But that's where God is, you see. We look for God. To go back to what we were talking about earlier on, come to me, all you who labor and are overburdened, I will give you rest. But Jesus also said, when I'm lifted up, I will draw all people to myself. And by so doing, indicated the kind of death he was going to die. Good Friday is the whole heart of the thing. We discover that we believe in a God who is prepared to die horribly for us. And after a year in which so many have died, uncomfortable and lonely deaths, I put it to you that you will not see the crucified Christ in the same way ever again. Anything else? Perhaps before we call it a night and go and do our 8 o'clock shift with our torches and candles and the little lights you get on your phones and stuff. I'm going to go.
Can I just say something before we finish?
Of course you can, Beryl.
I would just like to say that this Tuesday evening has been a bit of a lifesaver, in as much as people who live alone, I think, have felt more vulnerable. The vulnerability has increased during this lockdown and this last year. So I think that when you come to Jesus, it's much easier to do that amongst people of faith.
Yeah.
And when we haven't had public worship, I think that's made the vulnerability worse.
Yeah.
I think people have felt more vulnerable.
Yeah.
So Tuesday evening is a reinforcement to me of I'm surrounded by people like myself in faith, and that gives me strength.
Well, thanks be to God for that. That's wonderful.
Because the cancellation of public worship, and we know all the reasons for it,
Yeah.
right proper though it is, but I think that takes some strength away from us.
Yes, it does. Of course it does. Well, we're back.
And we feel it more.
Sunday, Holy Trinity at 9:30, St. Stephen's at 11. We're back.
Praise be to God.
Absolutely. And, you know, working desperately to try to get everything in place for as many people as we can. And we'll keep doing that. And we'll keep doing that. And we'll keep doing that until we come through this.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for all you're doing and all you're trying to do. Thank you for Tuesday evenings. I hope other people feel the same way. It's a huge success and it's been a huge help.
Well, thank you, Beryl. I really appreciate that. And I know everybody who's played a part in leading the sessions will feel the same. It's been a team endeavor, and the reason it works is because of all of you. Because of your willingness to be perhaps a little vulnerable and to, you know, use technology in this way. As I've said on previous occasions, I found it enormously strengthening to be part of this group. And I hope, I don't know what the spin-offs will be. I mean, other than the fact that we're going to keep doing this, what the spin-offs will be in broader terms. But remember that this is something that you can talk about to people. This is something you can invite people to. And all you need to do is pass on a name and an email address to me of somebody who you've invited, and I will include them on the weekly invitation. And who knows what might come from that. So it's another aspect to this, which I hope will drive us forward. But for the moment, dears, I'm going to sign off. We will meet again next week for Holy Week, obviously, and we will maybe look a little more deeply into some of the kind of really sort of significant points of the things that are going to happen. But for the moment, I'm very, very glad indeed that you're so positive about this. I'm going to go and see if anybody's stolen my IKEA glass candle case, which one must always be mindful of, but we'll see. And I may just meet Fiona, who is walking the dogs, on her way back. So that'll be lovely. But thank you again, all of you. And thank you, Beryl, for all that you said. And it just makes me look forward to next Tuesday even more. So bless you and thank you. And take care.
Thank you for.
Bye.
Bye, Damien.
Thanks, brother.
Bye, God bless.